In UniFi network controller, if you go to system log critical, it's very possible you will find some warnings like this: primary internet is experiencing high latency, or this one, primary internet is experiencing packet loss. For both warnings, UniFi suggests you to restart the modem or contact ISP. But if you rarely follow the instruction, 99% of chance it doesn't help. The next day, at about the same time, the same message will come up again. So you may wonder what these messages really mean, how UniFi find out those problems, and how it works behind the hood, right? So in this video, let's talk about it. We will first go through the settings on the front end, then explore the configurations inside the UniFi router, how the monitors are configured. Then we will SSH into a UniFi router, find out how it's working in action and how we can do some exercises by ourselves. A lot to talk about. Let's get started. This is my lab environment. I use UDM Pro as the UniFi console. If I go to UDM Pro under settings, there's this interesting setting called Internet Verification Server, and it's defaulted to ping.ui.com. You may wonder what an Internet Verification Server is. You may also wonder what's ping.ui.com at all. Just from the domain name, it sounds like a echo server, which is able to respond to your pings. But why Ubiquiti call it Internet Verification Server? At least we have two questions already. What is ping.ui.com? That's easy to find out. So let me launch a terminal, dig the domain name, ping.ui.com. So you can see it's nothing but two possible IP addresses. You may be very familiar with these two already. One of them is from Google, the other is from Cloudflare. They are both internet domain name resolvers. You may even set your DNS server to them, right? But why on earth Ubiquiti set the ping.ui.com domain name to these two IP addresses? Because we have no idea what a internet verification server is, let me try to go to the old UI or the so-called legacy UI. You can see for the same setting, in the old UI, it's under advanced. It's called echo server. This time it's very clear. We all know what a echo server is, right? It's just a server to respond to pings. You know what? This is a typical Ubiquiti UniFi way. In the beginning, when they introduce a feature, they use some open source solution which were already widely used by everyone, but they hide all the details, give it a very simplified front end under the name of being user-friendly. That's okay. But then after several years, Ubiquiti doesn't like the industry widely accepted name. Then they invent a new name. For example, here in the new UI, Ubiquiti call it Internet Verification Server. Then all of a sudden, most people have no idea what Ubiquiti is talking about. There's a big problem behind this practice. It cut the links of the history of knowledges on the internet. Because if you search UniFi Echo Server, you may find many old web postings. But if you search Ubiquiti UniFi Internet Verification Server online, you may not find the old postings. That should have been avoided. So I really don't like this practice from Ubiquiti by introducing some fancy name, hiding all the details from the users. Another thing I don't understand is these two servers, they are supposed to be used as public DNS resolver. Why Ubiquiti chooses these two instead of using their own dedicated echo server? Maybe only Ubiquiti knows. Because we don't expect to find more detailed settings about this echo server, let's try alternative approaches. So you may know for UniFi consoles, if you go to console settings, there's a option you can download the support file. It will be a huge file, including the configurations, including the log files, a lot of detailed information. It's supposed to be used by Ubiquiti support to troubleshoot your issues. We can use it to find out a lot of settings which are not available on the front end. So let me download the file. Then we can try to find out whether we can find anything about this Echo Server setting. I opened the downloaded files using Visual Studio Code. Under System Network folder, there's a file called UUS-services. By the way, this file is just a regular JSON file. There's a section called WAN interfaces. Under it, there's monitors section. There are multiple monitors configured instead of just the one you see on the UI. And there are a lot of other surprises. First surprise, you can see there's a type property, right? There's not only ICMP, which is related to ping, but also DNS. So Ubiquiti also use DNS query to monitor the internet health. And the second surprise is in the monitors, something we may not think Ubiquiti will use. For example, it uses Microsoft.com and it uses Google.com. By the way, Google.com is not the same thing as 8.8.8.8. Google.com is for web searching. The other one is for DNS resolving, even though they are both from Google. And even though we already have the ping.ui.com, which points to the OR1 IP address, there's a dedicated monitor here. I believe the thinking behind it is if you change the default Echo Server on the UI, Ubiquiti still has a way to use the DNS resolver from Cloudflare to test the internet health. And the last thing is, you can see there's a special section called Alert, but not all the monitors have the alert section. So let's see which ones have the alerts. So for ping.ui.com ICMP, yes, it has alert. For 1.1.1.1 DNS, it has alert. And for the OR8 IP address DNS, it has alert. So these three monitors are the only ones which have alerts. For all others, they don't have. What that means, in my understanding, the alerts will correspond to the warning messages you receive on the UniFi network controller in system logs. For all the other monitors, statistics may be used in some other front-end internet health display, but they will not be used showing you the warnings. And under alerts, you can see two values. One is called latency threshold. The other one is called loss threshold. So let's examine the one which exactly corresponds to our UI. This monitor 9. See the ID 9? It has alert. It's pointing to the target, which is the one we see on the UI. And the type is ICMP, right? You may ask, why not this one? It looks very familiar. It's also the same domain name. It's also ICMP, right? The difference is it doesn't have the alert section, and you can see the time period is different. This is for 1 day. The other one is for 1 minute. So let's examine what are exactly set in monitor 9. Latency threshold. This one corresponds to the error message you see in system logs about internet latency. So the 1500 is in millisecond. Only if the ping latency is exceeding 1.5 seconds, the system will issue warnings. Then about the loss threshold is 50, is percentage. Only if 50% of your pings get lost, the system will issue the alerts. Okay? Now we understand how to interpret the settings, right? Of course, you have no way to change it on the UI. It's hard-coded by Ubiquiti. Intervals 3. So the 3 means every 3 seconds, the system will do the ping. And then, of course, the target is what we set on the front end. And the time period is 60. This means the system will do the average every 60 seconds. Not just because you lose one ping, the system will issue the warning. No, it will do the average for every 60 seconds. Before we move on to the system to see it works in action, let me try to change the front-end settings. Then let's compare the downloaded support file to see whether we can observe any difference. Just for fun, I go to the UniFi network controller, change the internet verification server to youtube.com. In real world, you don't want to do that, right? I will not show you how I download the support file. I will directly compare the two results side by side. This is the same file, pre and post changes. The left side is ping.ui.com. The right side is youtube.com. The settings are almost identical. The only difference are in two monitors. This monitor, for every day, it will ping this server. This is changed. The other one is the one for every 60 seconds. It will ping the server. This one is changed. For all the other monitors, they remain the same. For example, the DNS servers or even the servers for Microsoft.com, Google.com, they are not touched at all, which means even you change the setting on the front end, it will only impact two of the monitors. For all other monitors, they are simply hard-coded. You have no way to change them. Now let's go to the backend to see how it really works. Ubiquiti simply use the open source dpinger to implement the monitoring. As you can see, dpinger is a daemon for continuous monitoring of latency and loss on a network connection. On the screen, I opened two terminals, and for both, I already SSH'd into the UDM Pro. In the lower one, let me run this command. I want to run PS to display the current processes. The X parameter means I want to show the ones which are not controlled by terminals. I want to filter on the lines which are related to dpinger. Let me run it. A lot of processes are returned. So the first 6, they are about google.com and they have different IP addresses. Remember, in the downloaded file, we see a google.com monitor, right? So this makes sense, but why there are 6 in the monitors? We only see one google.com monitor, right? That's because you can do the test by yourself. If you want to get google.com IP address using dig, you may find multiple returns. For each return, for each IP address, there's a dedicated dpinger process. Okay, move on. The next one is about Microsoft.com. That's a strange setting in the monitor as well. Then this line is about the dedicated monitor for 1.1.1.1. Just in case you change the echo server on the front end, the system will still keep a monitor for the Cloudflare DNS server, right? And then the next two, they correspond to the ones for every day. See the seconds number here? For every day, it will use the echo server you set on the front end to monitor the internet health. And then why there are two? Remember, in the dig reply for ping.ui.com, we have 2 returns, right? So for each different IP address, the system will have a separate dpinger process. The last 2, they are most important because they exactly corresponds to the warning message we receive on the system logs regarding package loss and high latency. If you examine the settings, they are for these 2 IP addresses. Why? Because they are from the ping.ui.com. And then see the very last part. If dpinger detect issues, it will do this. It will call this script and provide this information. So what does this script do? It will simply create a system log. Exactly because the dpinger detects some issues, and then this script will create the entries we are familiar on the system log section on UniFi network controller. So then let's pick one example to examine the parameters. For example, this particular one. So in the upper part, let me show you the command help for dpinger. So let's check this highlighted particular line, dash followed by lowercase I. It's simply for some informational thing just to identify what's this process for. And the dash capital B means the source IP address. Remember, this is my lab environment, so the source IP address is my internal home network IP address for my UDM Pro for the WAN part. And then the capital letter I indicate the interface. EAS9, if you are familiar with UDM Pro, is the 10 gigabit part for WAN, for internet. M section followed by the so-called FW mark or firewall mark. So it's used internally by Linux to identify the packet in firewall. And then the S option means every 3 seconds the system will do a ping. D option 1 means the payload is 1. Then the 60 seconds setting is for the time period over which the results will be averaged. That's exactly what we see in the downloaded file, right? The system will record the packets for polling purpose. This capital D is the threshold for latency alert. Capital letter L is the threshold for packet loss. Because of these two settings, dpinger knows in what situation it should call this script to issue a warning message in the system log. Okay, so these command line options are exactly the same as what we see in the downloaded file. So I believe we are good about in backend how it works, but you may still want to see how dpinger work exactly, right? So let's do some random testing. So let me run this command. See, I'm manually running it in the terminal. Basically, I want to use the same WAN part, and for every second, I want to do a ping, and for every 10 seconds, I want the dpinger give me an average value. I want to display the report for every 3 seconds. For the IP address, I pick x.com. Okay, let me run it. See, that's the simple return from dpinger. Keep in mind, once you kick it off, it will run forever. Every 3 seconds, I get a report. The report has only 3 columns. The first column is the latency in microseconds, not in milliseconds. So apparently it's not exceeding the threshold we set in the UniFi network controller, right? And then the second column is for standard deviation for the first column. And the third column is for packet loss. I don't have any packet loss. This simple testing means currently my internet is super healthy. You cannot simply kill the session by using Ctrl+C because it will keep running. So the way to kill it, in a separate session, I get the process ID and then I kill it in that session. Okay, you can see it's killed. We should have ended here. I have one last thing to show you. Remember here what we are seeing is how dpinger runs, but you know internally dpinger simply do the ICMP ping, right? Here we still don't see the ping. Maybe some of you are still not very comfortable, right? So let me do one last thing. Let me show you the captured frames in Wireshark so we can see the real pings over there. I captured the frames using Wireshark for the WAN part of the UDM Pro. As you can see in the filter, I set it to ICMP, which means the frames which are related to ping. And then I only want to see the frames to this Google DNS resolver or from it. So then you can see a very good pattern for the frames. This is my UDM Pro's WAN part IP address. Every 3 seconds, you can tell from the time column, my UDM Pro will ping this DNS resolver from Google. This is the result of the process which is running in UDM Pro for dpinger. Another example, Microsoft.com. In the backend settings, every 10 seconds, UDM Pro will ping Microsoft.com, right? See here, every 10 seconds, UDM Pro will ping this IP address. This is for Microsoft.com. Okay, I believe it's clear enough. This is the end of the video. Thanks for watching.